When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
Now, this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up, man? And welcome to Or Whatever. No? Nah, not so much.
It's on you. It's on you. I've decided not to do it.
I'm your co-host, Iris Mon, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today we're talking a movie based on a true story, 2024's
Cool Runnings.
No, come now.
Sebastian from The Little Mermaid.
Stop.
Sebastian Origins.
Stop. Bob Marley, One Love.
At least you said the title right. Oh, look at you singing
now.
I was worried, man. My opening salvo was going to be Iris, Where's the Love? Because Iris has been going through it and was like all grumbly about having to take like 3 tries to finish this movie. 4 tries? What did it take?
Yep. Took me a week. It was a week. And I finally got through it, although I can't say I know what's going on. So what really makes this movie special is that it's the first movie in Or Whatever Movie's history where I turned off the subtitles. Off.
This isn't Gladiator. This isn't any Ridley Scott movie where they just disregard any language or dialect or whatever.
So is Patois considered a dialect of English or an entirely separate language?
The dialect of the common people that changes words within the primary source language.
Local or regional dialect. A colorful,
what did
descriptive, you did. An emphatic Creole dialect that has been shaped by African, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and English colonial heritage. Couldn't understand a word of it.
Why then did you turn off the subtitles? Really enhanced the experience for me.
Because the subtitles were in patois, or they were phonetic, and they were further distracted. It was like I was trying to decipher 2 different languages simultaneously.
Interesting.
So I was like, I'm just going to roll with it. I'm going to try and take whatever they're saying in context of their body language or their action and go with it.
I wonder, though, this struck me as Plan B's attempt. This is Didi Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, and Brad Pitt, looking to be commercial and accessible. I thought this was going to be a 3-hour Oliver Stone, The Doors type, really deep dive into the Rastafarian religion, into pot and music and the message and politics and how it all comes together in this swirling mass of color and smoke. And it wasn't. And so I thought this being a fairly standard music biopic and then having it be indecipherable at times or just unintelligible is weird.
So you're saying you thought it was going to be this sprawling deep dive epic, but it was more of a straightforward standard biopic of Bob Marley during mostly just the creation, release, and tour of Exodus.
Right, but at the same time, difficult and requiring a bit more attention because he was so hard to understand. I produced a documentary called Rise Up 17 years ago, a deep dive into the kind of underground music culture in Jamaica. And so I'm more familiar with the dialect. But other than that, this movie feels, you said it was special, but it's important because who else does Jamaica have? Like, Bob Marley is their Michael Jordan. There's just who else is Jamaican that we have? Is it Sebastian? Is it the Cool Runnings guys? What else you got?
There's probably a fair distinction to be made between pop culture and Jamaican culture. I mean, the political leaders of the time were an important backdrop, But yeah, in terms of popular culture, I don't think that Sebastian or the Cool Runnings guys hold a candle to Bob Marley. I mean, he was an international superstar and an important one during a time of particular unrest.
We in Jamaica, we know about their political unrest and their civil war, basically, and all that stuff. But mostly it's through nothing is more pervasive in the world as far as Jamaican culture than arts and entertainment, right? And so we get the message of the politics largely through Bob Marley. It's not to say that the other stuff is not important or known. It's just to the masses. I think Bob Marley is the key master.
Well, and also Dad loved him some Bob Marley.
Yeah, so Ziggy Marley, who produced the movie, the Marleys at large and Tough Gong Productions produced the movie and said that they didn't want it to be as much about authenticity or politics or anything like that as a feel. Let's call it a vibe. The vibe is what's important. And Dad is a big Motown fan and only ever listened to that genre of music. And then Bob Marley, like later in life. Right. He embraced Bob Marley and the music, and that was the only other type of music that reached Dad. It may have had something to do with the giant poster he had in the garage of Bob Marley, like shrouded in smoke.
Seeped.
But musically, that one touched Dad where nothing else did, except the music from his childhood.
I think it was just the perfect music to chill out to as he was aging and smoking a ton of weed. What did they say? Bob, do you smoke a pound of weed a day? And he's like, a pound?
That is, do you know what a pound is, how much a pound of weed is?
I don't even know how much an eighth is or a dime bag. How much is in a dime bag?
Look, I know that a dime bag is small enough that it fits in your pocket. I know that an ounce is like trafficking or whatever, right? If you have more than an ounce, then you're in trouble. 16 of those a day? I don't think that's a thing. Not even for Bob Marley, not for Snoop Dogg, nothing. But it's not just the weed is cool, man. It's really an integral part of the Rastafarian religion.
Yeah, it's considered to have beneficial spiritual medicinal effects.
Yeah, all that stuff, except for the cancer in your toe. It's the opposite end of your body for your mouth, so the pot can't help you if you get toe cancer.
Man, that's really tragic. What was he, 36?
It's very annoying. So I was surprised by this movie in that he had the toe thing. He got it treated. They discovered cancer in his toe by means of that examination. It didn't mean that it was localized entirely in his toe. But my understanding is that he didn't want his body mutilated by amputating the toe, that it could potentially stop the spread. That was against his religion. And that's not what this movie seemed to suggest, but rather that one of his kids said that Bob didn't want his toe amputated because it would affect his ability to dance, which seemed even more silly to me, but whatever. I'm saying Bob Marley's voice was his power, and the toe was the opposite end of his voice, and it took him down at 36. Steve Jobs decided to go holistic or whatever and died at 50? It's ridiculous. And when you have people of such cultural significance that just give it up and all that wasted potential, it's very frustrating.
Right. You can fall on one side or the other about the benevolence of the tech that Steve Jobs created. But I think that we can undeniably say that the world would be a better place with more Bob Marley, One Love, peace messages in the world.
Now, of course, as messages go, John Lennon was also about peace and love. Still beat his first wife. Bob Marley, kind of violent. His nickname was Tough Gong because that little dude at 5'6" and 3/4 or whatever was known for being tough and hard scrabble in the streets of Kingstown.
Well, I could see that on the soccer pitch, but he didn't hit Rita back when she smacked him in the street.
Nah, you don't do that. But he did beat that dude with a chair for stealing from him, and he was definitely unfaithful as much as this movie tried to spread frosting over that.
Oh, you mean as evidenced by his 6 illegitimate children?
Yes, 6, in addition to the, 5 that he had with Rita?
They had 3 together. She had 2 from previous relationship or relationships. And then 6 during their marriage.
Yeah, the Marleys are everywhere.
With 6 different women.
There's Ziggy's and Damien's and Junior Gong's, which also might be Damien, and Moon Unit and Zazu, and there's Marleys all over the place.
I didn't look it up to be petty, although I did click on the People magazine link. I looked it up because I just didn't understand the relationship as portrayed in the movie between Bob and Rita. I wasn't even sure that they were married.
Yeah, they were hugging buddies for sure.
And maybe that was authentic to their relationship and a depiction of how they were kind of partners in life and music and family, but not necessarily lovers. But interesting dynamic.
They did some loving. They did at least 3 kids worth of loving.
Yeah, not on screen. And she seems okay or at peace with the fact that, he brought more love into the world with his 6 children by the 6 other women.
Yeah.
He got around, spreading some love.
They were in constant contact, and they seemed like besties or whatever. The intimacy, maybe not so much, but she was always around, even when he was in different countries and stuff. He was talking, even though he was posing with like Miss World and stuff. And that's the first inkling I got of maybe cheating or infidelity or maybe open marriage or whatever.
So what was Rita's problem with Bob then? That he was changing? That he was losing sight of the message of the music? He wants to perform in Africa, and that's the thrust of the film, and then it wasn't, and then we don't even depict him going. It's a coda. Like he ends up going. He ends up fulfilling his dream. What did Bob want? What was Rita upset with?
I think that Bob was about love and music and just doing what he did best. But he insisted on doing so in the face of political upheaval, in the face of his family being in danger. Like quite literally, it was life-threatening for him to go perform at the peace concert, and he was going to do all that stuff regardless of the challenges or the dangers. And at the same time, he seemed so hyper-fixated on his music to the exclusion of other things like safety and family life, like being present, because he had to be in exile or he had to escape or whatever. But still, he was finding his outlet with other women, and it just kind of reached a boiling point for her. I think that, to your point, he was so invested in his music that was his real connection. He did that regardless of how that affected his life.
And I'm sure it's just a result of the disjointed viewing, in my experience with Bob Marley One Love, but why? Who tried to shoot him up, and why did they do that?
He never said. They never actually determined. He said he never actually saw the gunman. The gunman coming and begging for forgiveness was a contrivance, was made up for the movie, but that he believes he knows who was behind it. And when asked if those people were ever punished for their crimes, he said not in a court or not legally, which implies that maybe they were judged, by God or by street justice or whatever, some retribution. But like many things in this movie, the motivations, the sources, a little bit unclear. I understand that the political parties were opposing and there was a real struggle for power in Jamaica at the time. How Bob Marley necessarily fit, why he was a target, because he seemed to be endorsing one candidate or another. His support of either candidate was not at all clear in this movie, and thus the motivations for killing him were not clear. They were as ambiguous as the identities of the killers. It was a vibe. And that's kind of it. And in sourcing these things, I was shocked by how many, I thought, absolutely crazy liberties were taken by this movie were all true. Not all of them. The gunman never appeared in his house. And that's just that dude's thing, right? Is breaking into houses, because he broke in to shoot him, and then he broke in and got past security for the chance to apologize. He was in his kitchen.
Yeah, alone, unescorted.
Like everybody getting shot, Bob Marley, I knew that incredibly. The dude got shot and was like, "No, I'm going to still do that concert." And 2 days later was on stage pointing to his gunshot wounds. The fact that Rita got shot in the head and her dreadlocks literally deflected the bullet enough to save her life. And then she checked out of the hospital and went and performed. All that stuff is true, man.
That's gnarly. Stranger than fiction.
Right? And insisting on him being her partner and like really being present in their marriage, nowhere near as important to her as being there for the concert, just like for him. No matter what, they could almost die and they would just let their marriage kind of go to seed and they'll pick up the pieces later, but they got to show up for that show.
Yeah, well, they believed it was part and parcel with the message. So she was a whaler?
Yeah.
What was the significance of the Whalers flashback where they get the recording deal?
It was the story of his upbringing and how he got his message heard or whatever, and particularly the story of his upbringing and his father, who was the dude on the horse. And it had that, from the outset, that dreamy sort of Oliver Stone thing happening.
So why was the dude on the horse his dad? In the fire?
I'm not really sure the legitimacy of the fields burning, but he only had glimpses, flashes of his dad. And that person who was, an important figure in his life, but he was a white man. I think they had something to do with his dad met his mom on a plantation or something where they worked. And then he was gone within 2 years or something. Or he left and then he died when Bob was 10, never having had a relationship. So he had these fleeting images of his dad and really not much beyond that. And it seemed like his dad was, according to Rita, the real Rita, just that dude in the photograph. And so that was that photograph brought to life, essentially.
And so I think the film was trying to communicate that Bob had some daddy issues and that part of him finding peace with himself was finding some sort of acceptance from his estranged or his dad who abandoned him, because the last flashback before the last concert we see depicted, the dad accepts him and acknowledges him as his son, and they ride off into a metaphorical sunset together.
Well, also, he showed up probably at the age his dad was when his dad died in heaven, and they were able to bond. He was like, let the toe take me. I want to go hang out with dad.
And also, he was showing up as a dad to his children?
He was. I mean, he didn't have any choice. They were going to hang around him because he's got like 10 of them. But it was also 1970s dadding, where he was like smoking weed with them in the car. And I don't think they were wearing seatbelts. That was some authentic 1970s fathering.
Oh, yeah. I definitely have my memories of the green tackle box and playing with the rolling papers.
Yeah, and rolling the seeds in between our fingers for some reason.
So weird.
It was just him, being accepted, finding his place in the world. His message was the key, but it was also about the man, albeit on a kind of a surface level. We got all kinds of glimpses and didn't really go deep into anything except the music.
And boy, did we get the whole discography. Where it was live or soundtrack, woof.
1 or 2 songs that weren't his, but at the same time, I'm kind of here for it because that's what we know of Bob Marley. Kingsley Benadir, who played Bob Marley, he confessed he didn't know anything about Bob Marley, the man, and really only knew some of the songs, kind of like I do. But still, when he breaks down, when he's creating Exodus, which isn't really even one of my favorite Bob Marley songs, that process of building it up from nothing is the closest I can conceive of to a miracle happening on screen. When there are things that you know well and you get to watch their inception, even in dramatic movie fashion, that stuff is awesome for me.
Oh, cool. So that was probably your top sequence. Ben Kingsley.
Exactly.
Kingsley Benadir.
Exactly. He's going to be fighting it his whole life.
Of course, he was Ken amongst other Kens.
Of course. Is that a given?
I'm just saying, it's not surprising that Ken didn't know a whole bunch about Bob Marley, the historical and cultural figure.
You mean being British as he is?
And most recently being a Ken, yeah. But also, he's no stranger to playing important historical figures.
Almost exactly from that time period, too, from that era.
He played Malcolm X in One Night in Miami, our discussion for which is available at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts.
Lashana Lynch, too, who played Rita, she's also British. She was briefly 007 in the last Daniel Craig one, or the one before it even, and was also in The Woman King with Viola Davis, and of course she was Maria Rambeau in the Captain Marvel movies.
Oh, wow.
So she's got a presence with her natural British accent. And why are we harping on the British, or why are we staying on the British thing? Because not Jamaican And for a movie produced by the Marleys to go with Kingsley Ben-Adir, who is, I think, a very good actor, kind of a surprise. I will admit that one of the reasons I didn't run to see this movie in the theater is I took one look at Kingsley Ben-Adir, who I didn't realize that's who he was at the time, and said, that dude doesn't look anything like Bob Marley.
He's much prettier, taller.
Much taller, like over half a foot taller. And although Ziggy Marley approved Kingsley Ben-Adir for the casting of his dad, that dude, Kingsley, didn't play guitar. He didn't sing. He can't dance. He's not Jamaican and had no grasp whatsoever of the patois. That is starting from scratch.
So a testament to Kingsley Ben-Adir's skill as an actor, or maybe just not the first or most intuitive choice for Bob Marley.
Just he's I guess a pretty boy, pretty enough to be Ken, but also put in a lot of work. Like he had 6 or 7 dialect coaches helping him with the patois. He has sworn it off. He says that out of respect for the culture and for the role, he won't do that accent again in another movie. He considers it almost sacred. But that dude put in some work, let me tell you. He was filming Barbie and then rushing off stage between takes and listening to Bob Marley and playing guitar and trying to learn. So I thought that Kingsley Ben-Adir, from the outset, from the marketing, was going to be the weakest part of One Love. It was one of the things that kept me away. I was like, they're just going to let anyone play Bob Marley, huh? And he turned out maybe to be the movie's greatest asset, because he's so committed. And although he doesn't look like him, at times he sounds like him. In the credits, a number of the songs were performed live by him.
Really?
Albeit singing, I'm not sure about the guitar, but obviously if it's not the recording, we can hear him singing conversationally to his kids and stuff, and in studio sessions when the mic's not on.
Yeah.
He did a lot of that stuff, a la Renee Zellweger in Judy or Jim Morrison in The Doors, Val Kilmer. But it was, it was enough, and it was a lot, and it eventually won me over.
About how far in? Because I'm not there yet.
Yeah. It did take a little while, but really him being completely immersed and the patois made it feel so different and so unique. It almost elevated what I consider to be a pretty standard music biopic to something indelibly special. And I'm at pains to figure out exactly why I have a good feeling about this movie.
It's the vibes, dude.
And consider that this movie was released, because it's got love in the title. It was released 2024 on Valentine's Day. And I was like, that's a little bit weird, because other than the title, it doesn't have a tremendous amount to do with love. And then it was re-released in theaters on April 20th. Why?
Why?
420 woot woot. And so it had a chance back in theaters. So I hope you all enjoyed your happy National Marijuana Cigarette Day.
Is that true? It was released 420 for 420?
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, while pot was present, and while that's kind of synonymous with Bob Marley, maybe not. I think that Bob Marley is more about the music, and he smoked a lot of pot, whereas Snoop is known as the dude who smokes a lot of pot and also occasionally raps.
It doesn't it's not his first defining feature. It's love first and then pot.
Yeah. But the point is, this movie is a vibe. And so when we're vibing and the music really helps with that vibe, it helped me to overlook a lot of the surface stuff, the stuff that was confusing, and the stuff that we kind of blazed through, no pun intended, at an hour and 47 minutes when it could have been an hour longer.
So did the featured reviews vibe with you? Are they feeling this indelible specialty of the movie? 6 stars, an interesting movie, but a bit all over the place.
It was all over the place. It took place in 3 different countries? And story-wise, I was thankful that we didn't get too deep into the politics, because that's what I enjoy least. So I was happy about that, and most of the time is spent in exile to make sure he's safe from the politically minded people who would want to kill him. Maybe not all over the place or not scattered, because they weren't throwing everything at us. They were actually throwing a limited amount that feels scattered because we didn't have a tremendous amount of context.
Apropos, 6 stars, every scene feels individual, lacking flow and full storytelling.
I can understand where that comes from because this didn't feel cohesive. I was kind of lost in the vibe and I was just like, here we are. It's kind of like what I assumed to be what it feels like if you're stoned. You close your eyes for an extended period of time and when you open them, there are new people in the room. Or maybe you're in a different room. I'm not sure how that goes. It felt kind of dreamy or whatever, and because it didn't have a thrust, like what's Bob's motivation? What's Bob's arc in the movie? None of that kind of factored in. It was like, stay alive so I can sing. And that's kind of it. So it wasn't like, we're getting away from how do you get away from the central story or lose the thread if you never had a firm grasp on the thread to begin with?
6 stars, and I'm sensing a theme here with the star count. Walk Hard, the Hollywood music bio. Reggae edition.
Yeah, it was kind of light. And Walk Hard, they're referring to the Dewey Cox story, which was the made-up John C. Reilly music biopic, which was essentially a comedy, albeit he was a country music star. So it is very light and could have been more comedic, but that's not what it was. It never felt like the epic that I think Plan B is more known for.
I think I might agree with some of these critics and say it was fine, but Bob Marley being who he is, who he was, maybe deserved a little bit better.
Why haven't we seen a full-scale Bob Marley biopic before this? Is it because the family were like, it's not right? It's not right? Because I'm going to argue like you're suggesting that this is not right. This isn't the definitive Bob Marley movie because it could have been a lot deeper. And so I think they were shooting for accessibility, but also authenticity because Ziggy said that capturing his dad and the patois was the most essential aspect. Not the way he looked, but the way he sounded and felt musically and rhythmically.
So the family had their priorities, and the filmmakers also chose to focus on his message of peace and love. There were a couple smatterings of interviews where he shows that. There was obviously the forgiveness scene, which I think was supposed to be the culmination of his character. And that's all lovely and makes me feel nice.
So ultimately, even though it was scattered, it did come around because you caught the vibe, is what you're saying?
Well, that certainly seems to be what you're saying, and I can get on board with that.
It was political, and then it was musical, artistic, and then it was sort of domestic and medical, and those sequences didn't overlap a ton. It was almost like we were marking chapters or a passage of time in Bob Marley's life, even though aside from the flashbacks, this movie takes place in less than 2 years. But somehow I'm telling you, man, I can't get away from the idea that maybe it's Bob Marley and not so much the movie, but it feels important, and I can't shake it. They can take liberties because they have a lot of play and a lot of slack that I will give them for being otherwise relevant. And I can't really explain it all that well. Music is the message and the music are one. The music must unite.
Am I smelling a totally?
No, not at all. There was a lot wrong with the movie, but no matter what, like the worst romantic comedies, if they get you, if you catch the vibe, if they hook you emotionally, you're like, aw, that feels good, that's sweet. And you overlook all that stuff.
Plus, Kingsley Ben-Adir kind of hot.
Yeah, I guess so. He has kind of a weird hairline, and at 37 or whatever, his hair is awfully white.
It's just because he's au naturel. And your final rating is?
I liked One Love, although this is a difficult movie to defend. I think they're trying to hit as wide an audience as possible because the movie does kind of fall apart. And it's held together by sheer force of will from Kingsley Ben-Adir and even Lashana Lynch to an extent. I'm going to give this an all right rating. You know what my biggest takeaway? This is so the opposite from our lives, from anything that we really experience, the pot notwithstanding. Our only connection to Bob Marley is the music. And he said in this movie, and I'm not going to do the accent, Puss and dog, they live together. What's wrong with you, my brother? But you know what doesn't happen in America? In America, if cats and dogs live together, it's mass hysteria.
That is Bob Marley, One Love, available on Paramount Plus. Did you enjoy this discussion, man? No, please.
No, stop it.
Stop. Did you
They don't say man one time. There's not a single yaman in this entire movie.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please let us know. 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed this new release. Check out 300 plus other titles at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts. And thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
We're the founders of Electrocast Media, bringing you great podcasts like Nightmare Road Stories, Tech Talk Revolution, and Bodacious Minds.
Electrocast networks include Ruby for female empowerment, the Best Business Network, and GPN for geopolitics. We built this company to create community and amplify diverse voices, and we really appreciate your support.
So, keep listening to Electrocast podcasts and hear the culture.
Electrocast.
Hey, it's Tim from 50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys, the comedy podcast you had no idea you needed. Join Ben, Jeff, and me as we continue our musical road trip back through the years and around the globe. See, just when you thought all white guys were like Joe Rogan, you come across 3 educators trying to remember when we were cool.
50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys.
Electrocast.